Hi everyone, welcome to this new IG Live hosted by Rapaport Jewelry Pro called the Diamond Jewelry Test. Are you selling it right? With GCAL by Sarin. Our guest today is Shari Woodring, the senior gemologist at GCAL by Sarin, and we're going to call her back in. We had a bit of a technical issue earlier, so we're going to go back to our conversation. We were talking about how to create trust, how to comply for jewelry description and for retailers. So I just want to tell you that you can catch up the full recording in our Reel section of Rapaport Jewelry Pro and also on the YouTube channel of Rapaport Jewelry Pro. And I'm your host today. I'm Sonia Esther Sultani and I'm a freelance jewelry writer and editor. This Instagram Live is brought to you by GCAL by Sarin Grading Lab. Whether you're a retailer, wholesaler, or gem enthusiast, GCAL by Sarin's advanced grading services ensure that the diamonds you sell are accurately, reliably, and transparently certified. With 100% guaranteed diamond certification, GCAL helps you sell with confidence. I'm going to host now. Please ask us in the question box or in the comments. We'd love to have all your questions to be answered today. Hi, Shari. How are you?
Hi, Sonia. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again, Shari.
Again.
So today, as I said, we're going to be talking about how retailers can protect themselves and their customers through accurate product descriptions, compliance, and independent verification. And before that, we need to know, what is this conversation so important for retailers? Tell us, Shari.
Okay. This is important because trust is everything in our industry, right? We're in a luxury business. No one needs to buy jewelry. It's a way to celebrate special occasions and treat yourself and express love. We're really privileged to be part of it. Everyone in our industry is responsible for the integrity of our products and ensuring that every customer's experience is positive. Consumers put their trust in the retailer who's selling the jewelry. They trust that what they're paying for is accurately represented. This pertains to the diamond's quality, metal purity, gemstone's identity. So if that trust is broken, whether it's through overstated grades or misrepresented materials or omitted treatments, it can lead to returns and brand reputation damage and even legal disputes, right? So whether you're selling in person or online, it's important to have clear and compliant product descriptions, tags, invoices, everything. It's more important than ever.
Absolutely. Trust and reputation. That's what GCAD is helping clients to achieve, and retailers in particular. I just want to remind people that in August 2023, we had a great live with the president of GCAL by Sarin, Angelo Palmieri. We actually visited the lab in New York on the live, so you can check it in our Reel section, on our YouTube section, as well for Rapaport Jewelry Pro. And please, guys, ask us questions for Shari because it's a really exclusive opportunity to be able to discuss all these very important questions for retailers, consumers, at any stage of the pipeline you are in. That's very, very important. And also, if you have questions that are not directly related to our topic, we'll be happy to discuss them after this live. You can always contact Rapaport or obviously Shari at GCAL by Sarin. So tell us, are jewelers selling their products the right way?
Well, some are and some aren't. And sometimes it's not even intentional. So let's go to the extreme. On the extreme end, there's fraud, there's deliberate deception, but that's pretty rare. And more often, mistakes are just omissions or misleading descriptions. So for example, a retailer might copy information from the vendor's invoice, they didn't verify it, and then they don't even realize that they're misrepresenting a product. And really, I think in our industry, most jewelers, the majority, really want to do the right thing and sell honestly. Obviously, the people that we have joining us today care about accuracy and compliance and consumer trust. And when jewelers might need a little help with independent verification or support, that's what we do at GCAL. We offer a range of services to help retailers and ensure that the products that they're selling are accurately represented. They're compliant with FTC and ultimately building consumer confidence throughout the industry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we discuss GCAL by Sarin grading services, but you also offer many other services. What were the other services the lab offers for clients?
Well, we do a lot more than just grade diamonds. From the very beginning, when Don Palmieri and Pam Palmieri founded GCAL, there's always been a focus on protecting consumers and supporting retailers with accuracy, making sure that every transaction is accurate and transparent. And every day in our labs, our quality assurance and grading teams are carefully inspecting diamonds and gemstones and finished jewelry. Our services include everything from metal testing and engraving to full jewelry authentication reports. So I have some samples to show
Oh,
you.
yes.
This is an example of a natural diamond certificate, a lab-grown diamond certificate, and we have all different types of jewelry reports, from full authentication reports such as this to smaller express size and even credit card size jewelry reports. So the reports are just one thing that we do, certificates. We also work with major retailers and have quality assurance programs. We're verifying the products that they buy and sell, that they're properly described, meeting the standards. When things don't meet the standard, we'll reject it. We help make sure that the retailers are staying compliant with FTC regulations, with industry standards. And in the cases when disputes come up, we also offer forensic analysis, expert witness services to help resolve them. Some of our other services include diamond traceability. So through our parent company, Serene, they also have a partnership with De Beers Tracer. So this new partnership is making it even easier and more cost effective to track diamonds' origin. It's something that a lot of retailers are really focusing on, natural and ethical sourcing right now. We have GemPrint. It's a patented fingerprinting technology for diamonds. This is capturing a diamond's unique light pattern. It's creating a tamper-proof optical fingerprint. So unlike laser inscription, which could be removed without even changing the weight of the diamond, or it could be falsely applied to a different diamond, GemPrint is a tamper-proof optical fingerprint. It's working on both loose and mounted, and it provides a time-stamped record of when and where the diamond was scanned. And then beyond traditional grading in these services, with our 4Cs, we offer light performance and cut analysis. So we're scientifically measuring a diamond's brilliance and fire and scintillation. Our 8X cut grade certification is a great tool for retailers who want to differentiate their higher level stones. It's measurable cut quality data that they can share with their customers. Of course, we're also offering diamond screening, identification to differentiate natural diamonds from lab-grown or synthetics. And our certificates, when we're doing grading certificates on natural or lab-grown diamonds, we're providing a guarantee. And that's unlike any other lab in our industry. We back our grading with a guarantee to the consumer so that they can buy with confidence.
That's great. I see someone said great service. Nice feedback. I will try to ask all the questions that are relevant to this discussion to Shari as we go along. If they're specific and right on target, ask them directly. So I think this one, I take it right now because I think that's very interesting. Are there any particular sizes to be able to get GemPrint certification?
I think GemPrint goes down to, I think it's like 10 points. I think you can GemPrint the stones in eternity rings sometimes. So we'll grade them loose. So we do a program that's a very high quality VVS eternity ring program, and we'll examine the diamonds loose. And then when they're mounted back in the eternity bands, we're checking them with GemPrint to make sure that they're the same diamonds.
Fantastic. That's something we discuss. We always go back to this saying trust, reputation, traceability. So really all the big things that matter are covered. I wanted just to remind people, if you haven't watched it, we have on this Instagram channel, in a reel section on a YouTube channel of Rapaport Jewelry Pro. We visited the Sarin lab as well. So we discussed the whole journey of a diamond. It's absolutely fascinating. And then you can jump to the visit that we did, GCAL by Sarin in New York, where we discovered every single station as well. So I encourage you to catch up with these two previous episodes because that was really, really interesting and our audience really enjoyed them. So
yeah,
if
it was great
to
have you in our lab for all around with Angela. It was a great little live.
So we like real life examples, and what do you have any specific stories, examples that we could share with our audience just to give them a feel for what it is and what are the big challenges that you might be meeting in your daily life at GCAL?
Yeah. Sure. So we see all kinds of things during these different services that we offer. So a couple examples. One was when we were grading a large batch of diamond rings. We were doing jewelry reports, and there was a big mistake in terms of metal purity and the stamps. So on this particular order, we were testing the metal. We're checking every component, which means on a ring, we're checking the prongs, the shank. On earrings, we're checking the posts and the backs, the tops. So on this particular batch of rings, what we found was that the prongs were rhodium plated 14 karat white gold, as they should be, but the shanks, they accidentally put on 10 karat yellow gold, but they were stamped 14. So that was kind of a big problem, that if the retailer had sold it, if it had gone unnoticed, then they would have been dealing with some really unhappy customers thinking that they were buying 14 karat gold and it was only 10 karat. And that was just an accident, but it happens. And we see the same thing in terms of carat weight. I mean, we've had cases where the total carat weight that was stated by the manufacturer was just a mistake, whether it's a typo or it's just off. Sometimes it's been off by just a little bit, like they're pushing the boundaries of what it's supposed to be, and they're under carating a little bit in terms of the diamonds. So we've seen cases like that. But we also have cases where we're helping retailers when consumers are making a large purchase, an important purchase. It's very often that they want a second opinion before they make that final commitment, before they put their money down, right? And so we've helped the retailers by acting as an independent person in the middle, where the jeweler will send the item to us, whether it's a $5,000 diamond or a $500,000 diamond, as we've done. So they send it to us, we check everything, make sure that it's what it's supposed to be, so that the customer can feel more confident before they buy. It's a little extra assurance. Some other examples of things that we do, we help resolve disputes, whether this is between a jeweler and customer or a retailer and a vendor. One of the things that we've seen a lot is, for example, a jeweler is selling a natural diamond ring, and then the end customer takes it to another jeweler to be checked out. It gets mistakenly identified, or they're told that it's a lab grown diamond ring, a synthetic diamond ring. The customer's, of course, very upset. They come back demanding answers. But the jeweler, who was honestly selling natural diamonds, they're like, oh my gosh, how did this happen? And so they've sent it to us. We check it out independently. And like in some cases, it is a natural diamond ring, and the competitor actually misidentified it. So as independent experts, we were able to step in and explain the situation to the customer. We helped clear up the doubts, and then we restored their confidence in the original jeweler. That type of thing happens. And so, I mean, wait, I've got one other example. So we also just had, this was pretty recently, there was a designer who was offered a very good price on lab grown diamonds, but she just felt like something wasn't quite right. So she sent us some. Turns out they were actually moissanite. They weren't lab grown diamonds at all, but they were being told they were lab grown diamonds. So if she hadn't followed her gut just to get it checked out, then she could have made this very expensive mistake and misrepresented her goods.
That is a very good story. That's a very good warning story. Guys, really ask us questions. I see two really good questions I want to go back to, just in case I don't want us to miss them for Sherry. So please then put them in the question box, just to be sure, because as I said, we're very lucky to have Sherry with us today. So let's get one more question to Sherry, and then we'll go back to FTC requirements, because I think that's something that is very interesting and extremely relevant to people. But what are some of the biggest mistakes jurors make when they describe their products? What do you see that they could avoid doing if they had a bit of help? And hopefully after this live, nobody will make the mistake again.
Okay, so there's definitely some things that are repeat offenders that we see. One of the things that jewelers need to know, and that many don't understand, is that everything that they say about the product that they're selling is legally binding. It's not just marketing. They're making an express warranty. So whether you've said it verbally during the sales presentation, or it's on a tag or a receipt or an online description, if you say it, you own it. The customer is making their purchase decision based on what you're telling them. So some more specific types of mistakes that we see: mislabeling of metals. We've seen a lot of jewelry advertised as sterling silver, and it turned out to be silver-plated base metal. Or items described as just gold, but they don't state the carat. And that's actually not allowed. If you're going to call something just gold, it has to be 24 karat gold. Some other things that we've seen are just incorrect terminology. Somebody selling a real lab grown moissanite diamond. Obviously, that's a clear violation and it doesn't even make any sense. We see overstating of diamond grades. If you call a diamond a G color and it's really an I, that's misrepresentation. You're representing the item unfairly. The customer's not getting what they expect to be getting. We see a lot of undisclosed gemstone treatments. So, many sapphires and rubies are heat treated. That's fine. But you should say it, a customer needs to know that. And then other cases, if let's say a stone is fracture filled or diffusion treated, if that's not disclosed, that's a major issue. There's a big value difference there, right? So some of these are small mistakes, but they could turn into much larger legal disputes in some cases.
No, absolutely. And it's so important. Just even to tell if a stone is heated or not heated, it will impact its resale value if the customers decide to resell it and get it appraised after they bought it a few years later. And it creates aggravation for the owner of the jewelry after a certain time. So definitely, I think that's so. And there was one question, Shari, that was in our chat, and I think that's just on cue with what you were just describing. What are the FTC requirements for selling and describing a lab-grown diamond to a consumer?
So that's very specific. So the FTC has very clear rules so they don't mislead consumers, especially when it comes to lab-grown diamonds. This applies to the US and the FTC rules. So if a diamond is lab-grown, it must be disclosed immediately before the word diamond. Right? So you can say lab-grown diamond, laboratory created diamond, man-made diamond, but it has to be immediately next to the word diamond in all locations. So in the title, in the fine print, everywhere. And you can't just call it a diamond without that qualifying word, because then you're implying that it's a natural diamond. Now, internationally, many countries actually prefer the word synthetic diamond, but in the US, the FTC is recommending lab grown or lab created as the standard. And for natural diamonds, you don't have to say natural at all. You can just say diamond. Some sellers are choosing to say natural diamond, but actually they don't need to. It's not required.
Great, very, very important point. And I love what Code the Jeweler is saying in our chat. That's why consumers should buy from jewelers who provide certification from reputable labs. Super important.
Thank you.
Definitely. And tell us, Shari, how does GCAL help retailer just to avoid all these pitfalls, all this dangerous situation? Like, for example, I didn't know. I'm admitting an ignorance that if you say gold, it has to be 24 karat gold.
Yeah.
It always annoys me if I go on the website and people don't say which karat gold it is. And it's usually designers that, have beautiful website, but they don't say it. So guys, be more careful. And how can you work with GCAL and make it sure that we don't have this issue?
I mean, I went over some of our services. We have the quality assurance. There's a lot of different ways. I mean, one of the big things that we do, retailers count on GCAL, like I said, as an independent checkpoint between their suppliers and customers. So whether it's, they're dealing with a new vendor and they want to make sure that the purity of the metal is what they're being told, we do things like that all the time. Even if you're a designer and you're buying parts, if you're buying a clasp, maybe you want to check what it is. So we have metal analysis services. Very often retailers will have certain requirements for their programs and they want the vendors to follow these specific requirements. And you'd be surprised at how often, the products don't meet the standards, whether it's honest mistakes or the manufacturers are really trying to push the boundaries of what they can get away with. But either way, having independent testing is really so important, and it makes sure that the retailers themselves are getting what they're buying.
Right, because that's the story of a jewelry pipeline, right?
Right.
It has so many components and so many different opportunities for mistake, honest mistake, and sometimes for misleading information as well. Do you provide services for Asian retailers?
Sure, we have clients all over the world. We have labs in New York and Surat, and we deal with all major diamond manufacturers. And certainly we have plenty of retailers in Australia, Singapore, Japan, around the world.
Great. So I hope that answers the question of the member of our audience. And so let's go back to our FTC guidelines. As I said, I learned something about gold and why it must be. So can you give us some examples of what the guidelines jurors should follow? And we could start with metal, for example.
Okay, so like I said, you can't say something is gold without qualifying it unless it's 24 karat. So if it's anything less, any type of an alloy, 14 karat, 18 karat, 22 karat, you have to clearly state the carat fineness. And not only that, but it has to be stamped with this fineness. And once you stamp it with the metal fineness, you're required to include a trademark, which I think a lot of people don't know. But actually, FTC says that if you stamp it, then you also have to include the trademark because you're responsible for it. Some other things for metal, gold filled. If you are calling something gold filled, that means that at least 1/20th the total weight of the item has to be gold. If it's something thinner like electroplating, then that should be labeled as gold plated. For sterling silver, in order to be called sterling, it has to be at least 925 parts per thousand. And for platinum, something that people might not realize, this was kind of a more recent change. If something is rhodium plated, it must be disclosed. And for something to be labeled just platinum, plat, or PT, it must contain at least 950 parts per thousand. If it's anything less, then the fineness must be disclosed. So you'd have to say 900 plat or 850 plat. I mean, that's allowed. You can sell 850 plat, but it has to be very clearly disclosed because otherwise, just platinum, it means it's 950.
It's so important to know that, especially platinum is becoming more popular at the moment with the price of gold going crazy. So all this is so interesting. Thank you, Shari. That's
Yeah,
really
the
a
other
great
thing is
point.
that all these disclosures, they have to be, they can't be in the fine print. They can't just be hidden somewhere below. Like any of the disclosures that we're talking about, they have to be obvious that so that the customer actually sees them.
Absolutely. Someone said earlier disclosure is so important, but we're all, I think, on the same page on this one. We're all for disclosure. I have one question before we jump to the next one. Does GCAL give feedback about FTC language requirement or similar when they verify jewelry?
We do have programs like that. So we have some mystery shopping programs or some just quality assurance programs where the retailer is asking us to review their descriptions and find anything that's not compliant. So we'll tell them, oh, this one thing, you're not saying it the right way. So definitely we're doing a lot of that.
We have good questions, but before we move to more questions from our audience, stay with us. We're going to answer them. We talked about metal, the FTC guidelines. What about the jewelry, Shari? For diamonds jewelry, how you mentioned about lab grown, it needs to be mentioned.
Exactly.
Some people decide to add natural, but it's not required, right?
Exactly. For other rules for diamonds, if it's a simulant, you can't say, I don't know, that it's a diamond moissanite. That's not allowed. You have to clearly say what it is. So you have to say it's cubic zirconia or that it's a simulated diamond. It has to be right next to that word so that it's very clear. Treatments have to be disclosed. If they require special care, aren't permanent, if they significantly affect the value, those have to be disclosed very clearly. One other rule that people might not realize about diamonds is that if it has less than 17 facets, you shouldn't use the word diamond without a qualifier. So if you're selling a rough diamond, you need to say rough or uncut diamond, or you can say partially faceted diamonds or rose cut diamonds. But you need to qualify that word according to FTC.
That's great. And I love it because more and more consumers are becoming more knowledgeable. So they see all these words, but finally, with what you've just said, they can actually match it. And, and I guess some people on the sales floor as well, when they start, they're not as knowledgeable.
Right.
So it's good to have the collaboration like this with the lab and people who can really help you and guide you. So that was really, really interesting. And we're going to move through everything. We've done the metals, the diamond jewelry. What about our gemstones? Because that is even broader. And I think it was so important what you said earlier, when it's treated, heated, all these things that need to go there. What other things, Shari, people should be aware of?
Okay, so obviously it has to be identified correctly. You cannot sell a topaz as a sapphire or a glass as a topaz. So that's just the most basic thing. Other things, just like for diamonds, if a gemstone isn't natural, then you need to immediately disclose this before the word. So you can't say ruby in the title and then somewhere down below say lab created. It's got to be right next to that word. So you have to say laboratory created ruby or synthetic ruby right together. That's really important. And if something looks like a gemstone, but it's not, so let's say you are selling red cubic zirconia, you should say that it is a simulated ruby cubic zirconia. You can use terms like simulated. That's an okay term. Misleading names. So if you want to use a trade term, I don't know, something like Brazilian sapphire, but actually it's blue topaz, you can't do that. You have to clearly say that this is a topaz because consumer doesn't know what Brazilian sapphire means. And treatments are really that's one of the big things with gemstones. You have to disclose treatments. So any enhancement needs to be clearly stated, especially if it affects the value, it's not permanent, or it requires special care. Those are the three big things. And this information must be displayed prominently somewhere and not just hidden. So one of the big ones, let's take, for example, diffusion treated sapphires. Disclosure for this is mandatory. There's a big difference in value. So diffusion treatment, it's surface diffusion. It alters only the surface of a sapphire. So you can take a colorless sapphire and diffusion treat it and it gets just a blue layer right on the surface. It's not the entire stone. And so this is really a difference in value that a consumer would never know. So it has to be stated. You can't call that product a natural sapphire without immediately preceding it or following with the words diffusion treatment. And you can't use vague terms like enhanced. You have to say specifically what it is. Consumers also need to be told about the durability. So if a treatment isn't permanent or the stone requires special care, that has to be explained to the customer.
Very important. That's great. Thanks, Shari, because this is just so important and for everyone, designers, consumers, retailers. So that's really a great point you've just made. And just I had one question as you were talking. You said for color gemstones, you can use synthetic in the description.
Acceptable terms: lab grown, laboratory created, man-made, synthetic. Just like with diamonds, the preferred terms in the US are lab grown, lab created. They're very easily understood by the consumers in the United States.
Right.
But synthetic is also, I mean, these are synthetic gemstones. That's what they are. And so that is also acceptable. Synthetic means that it has the same properties. So that means it has the same chemical composition, the same crystal structure, the same optical and physical properties. So just because a CZ is man-made, laboratory created, that doesn't make it a ruby, a synthetic ruby, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. We have one question that is a bit more specific to Jika that we'll take later. So please don't stay with us. We're going to cover everything. But I think I would like to stay on this topic of gemstones and disclosure. Is it scary for a retailer to have to handle this conversation with the clients?
It shouldn't be scary because really it's about educating the customer. It's about honestly representing what you're selling. And the majority of gemstones are treated and it's completely normal. So, rubies and sapphires are heat treated. Most topazes radiation to enhance the color, and emeralds are oiled to improve the clarity. This is all normal. So if a retailer is going to educate the customer, they can say it in a way that's not alarming. They can say, this ruby has been heat treated, which is an industry standard process that enhances the color and beauty. So by explaining it, then the customer understands why it's treated and why it's still valuable. So for retailers who are trying to understand all the different enhancements out there, the AGTA, the American Gem Trade Association, has a really great gem enhancement guide that outlines all the common treatments and can suggest the right terminology that retailers are using for all different types of gemstones.
So don't be scared. Go there bravely and with confidence, and that will make your customer trust you and buy the piece in also great trust and confidence. That's I think what we're trying to say here. I think to also be very knowledgeable about industry standards as a retailer, a sales assistant, a designer. So you mentioned these great results from the AGTA. So really, there's a lot out there to help people do the right thing and communicate in the most transparent and accurate way.
Exactly. The other resource that's excellent out there that I recommend for everybody is the JVC, the Jewelers Vigilance Committee, has a guide to the FTC rules. And it's a very thorough, easy to understand guide. So I highly recommend that one too.
Let's go. We turn a bit the table. We look at the how the retailers can do to handle difficult situations. Like, let's look at the consumers. Arrives in the store, what red flags should a consumer pick on?
Yeah.
Something is not completely right there.
Okay.
What would you say?
So the first is, if it's too good to be true, it probably is, right? Nobody's giving anything away for free,
Let's say
right?
it again.
So, right. I mean, that's true for anything that you buy. If the pricing is too good, then it probably is not real. There's something wrong there. So follow your gut and look out for something that's unrealistic. You should also be cautious of pushy sales tactics. So if a jeweler is showing you an appraisal that says it's double or triple what they're selling it for, that's something you should really question, because good jewelers are not using appraisals to sell. They're just letting the quality of the piece speak for itself. Another just advice that I think is, you should always ask about the return policy. You need to understand it before you make a significant purchase. You want to know exactly what your options are if you find out that something isn't expected. I mean, some jewelers say final sale on their receipt, and then you have no way to go back. Another thing is, I think that people should shop from jewelers who care about their business. So somebody who's going to care if you leave them a good review or not. If you're shopping while on vacation in another country, I mean, when will you ever see those jewelers again? And they're not even necessarily online. So really, shopping locally or shopping from a reputable online jeweler is really the way to go. Let's see, a few other pieces of advice. Definitely get everything in writing. If a jeweler tells you that you're buying a platinum ring with a unheated 4.5 carat ruby, that's what the receipt should say. If they're telling you verbally it's an unheated ruby, you want to get that in writing, because that makes a difference in value. And something that they say verbally, while they're responsible, it's very hard to go back and prove. Some other advice would be, ask for independent documentation. If you're buying a diamond, a gemstone, it normally comes with an independent grading report or certificate. Make sure it comes from a reputable lab like GCAL by Serene. If a jeweler presents a report and you don't know the name, you better do a little research, find out where it's from. Some of the grading reports out there are actually graded by the manufacturers who are selling the diamonds. And then the lab is just like rubber stamping it and saying, yeah, okay, whatever the manufacturer wants. So that's not independent. That's not a good certificate for a consumer, right? I mean, that goes along with one of the biggest issues that we see in our industry for consumers is overgrading. So when a diamond is given a higher color, clarity, quality grade than it actually deserves, that impacts the price. It impacts what the consumer thinks that they're getting. And so if a diamond is overgraded by 1-2 grades, consumers could be overpaying by 40%, and then they don't find out 2 years later and they try to resell it and they're so upset. This is a problem. The reality is that not all labs use the same standards. Most people in the industry know this, but consumers don't. So if a lab is loosely grading or inflating grades, it's creating a false sense of value. If the manufacturer is grading the stones themselves, shouldn't the customer know that? Isn't that something that a customer would want to know? I think so. So for, kind of to summarize all the things that a consumer should look out for and think about, I think they need to ask a lot of questions, do a little bit of homework, and definitely get it in writing.
Great stuff. Get it into writing. And also, what I think is very important is what you said. It's actually when someone tells you in a store, whatever they tell you, it should be the truth. It should be the actual real information. And also people are relying on that because that's what they heard. And
Right.
and I think, maybe sales assistant can get sometimes carried away or not have the right information themselves, by lack of training, not always by dishonesty, actually, just by a lack of knowledge. It's a really, really great point. And we have here a really nice question. Are there any guidelines, since we talked about jewelry, are there any guidelines, Shari, for antique jewelry that are not marked for their metal purity? That's a bit specific, but since a lot of jewelry comes back on the market now, and a lot of people are into antique and vintage jewelry. So what would you
Right.
say?
So an antique piece of jewelry does not need to have a new engraving, right? So it's kind of being grandfathered in on the regulations. We're talking the FTC. I mean, still it has to be accurately identified on the receipt and on the tags, and the customer has to know what it is, but you don't have to add a new
Great,
engraving to a piece of jewelry.
great. Thank you so much. I hope that answers the Gigi's question. And we have another question that I'm so sorry. I wanted to keep for a bit later. From Jeff says it's a great podcast topic and guest. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I agree. And you briefly mentioned that the certification is guaranteed, unlike most top gem labs. Can you explain the terms of that warranty? What does it cover?
Okay, so this is a consumer guarantee and a money-back guarantee. So basically what we're saying is that we stand behind our work. We take responsibility for what we're saying. And if we make a mistake, then we're going to make it right to the consumer. So if we graded something as a F color and a consumer feels that that was misgraded or wrong, they can send it back to us. We will review it. If we find that we did make a mistake, because I mean, mistakes happen, but the consumer shouldn't have to pay for it, right? So if a mistake happens, then we would pay the consumer the difference between those grades. So if we said it's an F, but actually it turned out to be an H, then we're responsible for the difference to the consumer between those grades. Which some people may think, oh, well, that's not really much, but no other lab will take that type of responsibility actually in what they're doing. And yeah, we are our own arbitrator, but we've paid out on a few grades over the years because mistakes happen. But what we do every day, we're trying to be as consistent and accurate as possible. And it should never be, nothing that is a mistake should ever be on the customer's expense.
Right. Thank you. No, that we've been following GCAL for a long time here, and I know that's something that's very important, accountability towards the consumers and standing for the consumers as well. So that was a great question. Thanks, Jeff. I see that you're still here, so I love I hope that answers your question. Yeah, I think this discussion really show that consumers should feel safe with what they are buying, says Steffi Dry. So absolutely. And talking of that, any final advice for retailers and consumers, Shari, that you'd like to share with us?
I think let's just summarize. I mean, for retailers, transparency builds trust. So having accurate descriptions, accurately selling what you have leads ultimately to better customer satisfaction and return customers. For consumers, knowledge is power. Ask your questions, get it in writing. Feel free to get a second opinion if you're making a big purchase. It's okay to ask the jeweler to send an item out for independent verification before you put your money down. Like, they should be willing to do that. Or at the very least, you want to make sure that they'd be willing to take it back if you've gotten independently checked out after their purchase. Make sure you understand that return policy. At the end of the day, I think it's the truth that really matters, and that's what we're here to provide.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shari. Let's wait to see if we have any final questions. It's your chance. I just want to tell the people that are joining us now, we have the full recording on the Rapaport Jewelry Pro channel in the Reel section, on the YouTube section of the YouTube channel, of Rapaport Jewelry Pro. And we have 2 previous episodes that were really, really interesting that we did with Sarin. We explored the diamond journey. So we talked about traceability, trust, transparency from the source, from the moment the diamond is mined, so rough diamonds. Then we visited the GCAL by Sarin lab with Angelo Palmieri, the president of GCAL in New York. So we also saw all the different stations, all the different services GCAL by Sarin is providing. So that was super interesting. If you haven't seen it, same thing in the Reels on YouTube. And as I said, if there's any questions you didn't get the chance to ask today, you were a bit shy, you didn't want to put it in the comments, you can send Shari questions after this live, or you can send them to Rapaport and we'll relay them to Shari. So I would like to thank Shari for having been such a wonderful guest in the whole craziness of, we're talking about high tech, but it's been, I think I've learned so much personally. So here's very selfishly, I would like to say it was really
thank
great
you so
education.
much, Sonia. My pleasure, really. So thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much.
having us here today.
And please, guys, really don't hesitate. Let's open this conversation, pursue it, check resources, check the services that GCAL by Sarin is offering, but also, as Shari mentioned, the JVC, AGTA, the reliable associations in the industry that really offer so much information for people, for retailers to be able to disclose and feel confident about what they sell, and also for consumers to be able to feel trust in a purchase of jewelry, because we all love jewelry and we want
Yes.
people to enjoy their purchase and feel really confident and safe about it. So please carry on this conversation with Shari as you see fit after this live. And we thank everyone who joined us. Thank you so much for
Thank
all the
you
great
so much,
questions.
everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
So
Bye,
yeah,
Shari.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.